To my video on graphing given the equation y equals mx. So the equation of a line can be written in many different ways. The equation y equals mx represents a proportional relationship. And the reason why it's proportional is because I'm multiplying the x value by a number. And the m represents the slope, which we'll write down here. So it represents a proportional relationship in which the line passes through the origin. So if the slope is 6, that would be meaning I would multiply each x value by 6. Okay? And when we talked about proportional relationship, we talked about that it's a multiplication pattern. But it could also be division because we can multiply by 1/6, which is the same as dividing by 6. So the m represents the slope, which describes the steepness of the line. So here's the steps that I would like you to follow for graphing a line that's written in the form y equals mx. First, graph a coordinate at the origin, because if it's a proportional relationship, I know it's going to be going through the origin. Identify the slope and write it as a fraction if needed. And remember, we need a fraction if needed because sometimes it's already a fraction, but if it's not, then we need to have a rise and a run in order to graph it. So number 3, graph the slope starting at the origin. And then finally, be sure to graph in both directions from the origin. Remember that dividing two negatives always makes a positive. Okay, so let's use these steps to graph these. So remember when we graphed prior to this, we made a table, and I always said to choose -1, 0, and 1. Well, now this is going to be much easier to graph because if we identify this as y equals mx, which it is, then we know we're going to start at the origin. And now we just have to find the slope, and the slope is the number in front of the x. So check this out. We have -1 times x, so I can put a 1 underneath it to turn it into a fraction, and the top number is my rise, and the bottom number is my run. So we're going to rise -1 and run 1. So I have to go down -1 over +1, down -1 over +1, and I'm going to continue that down -1 over +1, down -1 over +1, down -1 over +1. Now, when I go this way, I got to do the opposite of what I just did. And let me show you what happens with the rise and the run. So remember, when it's negative, the slope is negative, I can put the negative on the top or the bottom. So if I switch it, now it allows me to go the other way. So watch. Up +1 over -1. Up +1 over -1. And I did not change the value of the slope by moving the negative, because a negative slope means that either the rise or the run is negative. Now, if there were two negatives, what would it become? Good, a positive. So use your ruler to make a straight line and make sure you have arrows on both ends. And I'm going to circle where it's crossing the y-axis. And it goes right through the origin. And it will do this every time the graph is in y equals mx. And also, let's read it like a book to make sure we have it sloped the right way, and it slopes down. And if I look at my slope, it's a negative slope. All right, let's move on to the next one. And it says graph y equals 4/3 x. So I know it's in y equals mx, so it goes to the origin. So we're going to put a dot right at the origin. The number in front of the x is my slope, so I'm going to label this rise. over run. And that means I'm going to rise 4 and run 3 from the origin. So start at the origin and count up 4 over 3. Let's see if I can do this one. I think I can. 1, 2, 3, 4 over 3. Very good. Okay, now I can't go any more in that direction. So now I got to go the other way. Now remember, in a positive slope, when I write it in the other form, that means they're both going to be negative. So my rise would be negative and my run would be negative because 2 negatives makes a positive. And we're going to go down -4 over -3. Down -4 over -3. Use your ruler to connect and draw arrows in both directions. And circle where it crosses the y-axis. Now, you don't always have to write it in the other form here like I am for both of these, but doing that helps you fill out the other pattern. Some of you will just figure it out real quickly that if I'm going up 4 over 3, then the opposite would be down 4 over 3. And you'll know if you made a mistake because your line will not make a straight line if you made a mistake. All right, turn to the last page. Let's do 2 more examples and then we'll recap it. Okay, remember what we said previously when we graphed a point and a slope. We said if the slope is negative, then we can place the negative either on the top or the bottom, and I just typically place it on the top. So we'll do that in a second. So look at this equation, and I know that it's in y equals mx because I have a number in front of the x, and I don't have anything that comes after the x. And we're going to rewrite the slope as -1 over 4. And then we're going to put rise over run. Because if a slope is negative, that means either the rise is negative or the run is negative. Okay, so we're going to rise -1. So we're going to go down -1 and over +4. And I can't go any more. So now we're going to go the opposite way. So we can rewrite it if we need to. 1 over -4. The slope is still negative. And we're going to rise +1 and go left -4. Okay, use your ruler to connect. And draw arrows on both ends. Circle where it crosses the y-axis, crosses right at the origin. And we didn't do this on the last one, but read it like a book from left to right and notice that it slopes down. And it's a negative slope. Okay, last example. It is in the form y equals mx, so I'm going to start at the origin. And then we notice that my slope is not a fraction. So if it's not a fraction, what number can we put underneath it and it will not change its value? Good. I can put a 1 underneath it. So the slope is 4 over 1. So I can do rise over run. And we're going to go up 4 over 1. Up 4 over 1. Now I want to go the other way, and since I have a positive slope, I have to make them both negative to go the other way. So now we're going to go down -4 over -1, and let's go one more down -4 over -1. Use your ruler to connect and draw arrows on both ends. And go ahead, I always like to circle the y-intercept because that tells you a lot about the graph. It tells you when it goes through the origin like that, it's in the form y equals mx. And let's read this from left to right, and it's sloping up. Okay, let's conclude what we've been saying all along today. Positive slopes slope up from left to right. Negative slopes slope down from left to right. And this we didn't talk about. The greater the absolute value of the slope, the steeper the line will be. Now, when I go back through this, you're not going to be able to see the graphs. I want you to look at the graphs on your paper. I want you to compare these two here. Notice the steepness of this one compared to this one. This one was a lot steeper because it has a greater absolute value. This is an absolute value of 4, and this is an absolute value of 1/4. So it's going to be a lot steeper. And if you go back to the first page, okay, which one was steeper here? Yeah, this one was a little bit steeper. And I know they're not going in the same direction, but look at the steepness of the line. This is 4/3, so this is a little bit greater than 1.3 repeating, and the absolute value of this would just be 1. So the greater the absolute value, the steeper the line will be. And hopefully you've noticed when we've been graphing that when it's a regular fraction, it was a fairly flat line. That concludes our notes on graphing given the equation y equals mx. I hope you have a great day.